Hi, I'm Emily Cadlin, your host of News Not Noise. This week, I'm in the news hut with Don Oates, the founder of Play Brigade. I want you to do me a favor. Close your eyes for a second and imagine that you're on the playground with your two young children. They're running around, they're going down the slide, they're climbing on the jungle gym, and they're learning all kinds of really important developmental things. They're learning to share and play together. They're learning to be independent and have adventures. They're learning social skills. And it's all fostering this idea of learning through play, right? Having fun. Now imagine this scenario, only now you're sitting on the park bench with your young daughter who has no use of her legs and minimal use of her hands and her arms. She'd love to play with her older siblings, but she can't. And you can see how this scenario changes from one of maternal bliss, watching as your kids enjoy their time outside, to one of angst and torture, as you realize that one child will never be able to experience those things, at least not with the current playground structures we have. Dawn Oates is here to tell us about how Play Brigade started and how she's trying to change this environment to be more inclusive. Enjoy.
All right, so I'm here with Dawn Oates, and we want to talk a little bit about play. I thought we would probably start, the most helpful place to start might be talking about the idea of inclusive play.
Yeah, sure. So inclusion is just the basic concept that everybody participates and everybody belongs. And I think that there's a huge misconception in the United States that everything has to be ADA compliant, and therefore anyone with a disability is able to participate in their community and engage with things in the community. And I think the misconception comes from, yes, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is 25 years old this year, really set a standard for people to be able to access things, but I think that being included in something is a lot different. And so the example I use most of the time is, it's great to be able to access somebody's birthday party, but it's even greater to be able to be included in all the activities that are planned. And so when we look at the idea of inclusion, it's taking it a step beyond the bare minimum requirements set by the federal government through the Americans with Disabilities Act. We got involved in inclusive play when my daughter Harper was born. She's now almost 4 years old. She was injured at birth. She has a spinal cord injury that limits her mobility. And she's very smart and she's very active and involved in everything we do as a family, but we do find challenges when we go out into the community. And these are challenges that I don't expect other people to really think about before they're sort of forced to in conversations kind of like this. Typically, I think the United States does a decent job in protecting the rights of people with disabilities, but it's that taking it a step further and guaranteeing quality of life within the parameters of ADA or going above and beyond the minimum requirements. I think that there are a lot of challenges there that ordinarily just are overlooked unless it really affects you or someone that you know and care about.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So
Sure.
When Harper was born, you have twins
Yes.
that were born 2 years before, and they were fine.
That's right.
And so it was a big surprise when she was born that there
yeah.
was any issue. Can you talk a little bit
That's
about
right.
what that experience?
Yeah, sure. So my twin pregnancy was a high-risk pregnancy, and it was fairly uneventful. They were in and out, delivered very quickly, didn't go to the NICU, everything was fine, they were developing fine, everything was great. My mother-in-law had said to me, listen, I wouldn't decide the size of my family based on anything financial related, because her personal experience had been that she and her husband felt that having 2 kids was a reasonable number that a couple could expect to have and be able to provide a good quality of life for. And she said that her biggest regret was only having 2 children, because they never imagined that they would be in the financial position that they are now. So she was encouraging me to really think about family planning in a way that really was meaningful and wasn't sort of based on, well, what do we think we could afford, which I think is a big factor to a lot of couples planning their families. Well, anyway, that really informed my thinking about it, and coming from a family with 4 children, we decided to have a 3rd child, and not a high-risk pregnancy, not a pregnancy that had any real cause for alarm until just, immediately before the delivery. And so when Harper was born, really for a good 6 months, we really had no idea what had happened. And as it turned out, it looks as though there was an injury that was catastrophic that happened at the time of her birth. So, there's a lot of ways to look at that. A lot of people would go back and say, oh, why me and what was me and all that. It was definitely very hard, but I'm more of the type of person that, you think about, okay, well, what are we dealing with, and what can I learn, and where can I go with this, and what is this going to do to my family, and how can we create an opportunity to live a full and meaningful life that's not denying our other children opportunity to live a full and meaningful life. And really, that's all it is. And people say to me sometimes, and I may be sort of jumping the gun here, but people say often, oh my God, you do this and you do this, and I don't know how you do it. And I just say, I do everything that you would probably do if you were in my situation. I want to raise good kids. I want to raise kids who have friends. I want to raise kids who feel that their community has thought of them, and that they can participate, and that they have opportunities, and where they can maximize their own individual and personal potential. That's what every parent wants for their kids. And I also feel like I'm raising compassionate, empathetic kids who are good problem solvers, critical thinkers, who are the people that you want to become good adults, who are working with you, who are your supervisor, who are your neighbor, who are the people that you come into contact with in your community. And there is the case for inclusion. And so when we talk about inclusive play, there are a couple different ways of looking at it. There are, we don't have a lot of kids with physical or cognitive disabilities coming to this playground, so we're not going to invest the time and money to renovate the playground to include those kids.
Is that actually evaluated?
I think that the evaluation is mostly subjective. I can't say for sure.
Because how would you know if you don't see the kids at the playground because they can't go? Why would they go?
It's subjective, exactly. And so the other way of looking at it is the whole field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And I believe that that's the case. I'm not sure if you're aware, but recently in the news, there was a story about a child who was 3 or 4 years old, and Make-A-Wish granted his wish of having an accessible playground in his yard. And when things like this come up, I have a lot of friends on Facebook who post things to my wall and just make sure I'm aware of stories like this in the news. And I got this particular story, and no one can help but feel a sense of glee and gratitude that someone was thinking of this child. But this story enraged me. And it enraged me because why in the world should families and nonprofit organizations be accountable for creating this play space that limits this kid to his yard? And why in the world are towns and municipalities getting off the hook for thinking about every citizen? We have 20% of Americans in the United States living with a disability. And statistically, everyone will be experiencing some sort of disability in a lifetime. It's just whether it's an injury, an illness, some kind of accident, the normal aging process. Mm-hmm. Temporary, permanent, whatever, we'll all be there. And the problem is when we get there, that's, in my experience, where you're overwhelmed and you're trying to pick up the pieces and you're figuring out, sometimes it's housing, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's long-term care. There's a lot going on when you experience that. And sometimes it can last years or forever. So my hope is that this movement of paying attention to inclusion and how we can, as people, as organizations, as citizens, as leaders, really take initiative in thinking ahead and planning ahead, because we're not just planning for other people's kids, we're planning for the future generations. We're planning for ourselves when we're there, whenever that may be.
Well, and setting a standard, right, of what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah. And I think one great thing about the city of Boston is the city of Boston really gets it. And in the 6 months that the Play Brigade has been working with the city of Boston, they have really embraced inclusion as super important, to the point where they have reconsidered language in their RFQ process for all the landscape architects and design firms bidding for the playground renovation jobs, so that they're saying, hey, the city of Boston believes that inclusion of people with disabilities is really important and it's a priority, and so we're going to tell you that. And so every design firm who looks at this and looks at this proposal and is ready to submit a proposal on playground design, they have to demonstrate that they understand what the principles of universal design are, that they understand that they're not just programming and planning for people with disabilities or kids. These are public spaces intended to draw in and engage everybody, multi-generational, multi-ability. And so they, in a 6-month period of time working with us, have committed to creating at least one fully inclusive, accessible playground in each major neighborhood in Boston.
Congratulations, that's major.
Thank you. Yeah, we were really excited about that. But I can't.
One of the things that I was, not to interrupt you, but one of the things that I was really struck by just by reading some of the literature you have on your website is that you're looking at it from a sort of a mother's perspective, a personal perspective, and then extending that courtesy, you could say, or like working on behalf of all of these other children. As a mom, I like immediately identified with that idea of wanting to protect your child, but I also really felt strongly that you're sort of like, this is a fight for a right to play and to have fun is so intrinsic in developmental structure of a child's brain, right? That like,
definitely.
how can you have a kid who's not going to be like naturally angry at the world that they can't go to a playground or they can't? I've never thought of it like that before until I read the stuff that you've written. And I felt like it was so powerful because I really felt like sort of this is an injustice to a community, not just to a child.
I think that's right, but I think I don't get angry and I don't feel like it's a fight. I think for us, we've been really lucky that it's been a series of really easy conversations with quick learning curves and positive outcomes. Now, I know that that's not the norm, and I know it's not always going to be that we walk in the door and people welcome us with open arms, shower us with praise, and give us all this opportunity. It's not always going to be that way. I would hope that it stays that way. But there's a point in time where someone doesn't know something, and then they know something, and they appreciate that they had the opportunity. So we're, in a sense, evangelists for inclusion. We really need to get the word out. What is this? Why is it important? Now, there's an important thing that I want to mention, and that is there's a whole world of people, a group of people who fear inclusion, when you especially in education. Oh, well, if those kids are in my kid's class, that might hold my kid back, and blah blah blah. All this.
Is that actually something that you've heard from people?
That's a thing.
Or is that like a fear? Like, is that?
I think it's a fear that other people have, and I've heard this discussed multiple times in the work that we do. And there are some people who wouldn't send their kid to an inclusion school or a school that really focuses on integrating and mainstreaming kids with disabilities into the mainstream classroom because they fear that the teacher will be teaching to, quote, the lowest common denominator, which isn't always the case.
It probably varies by disability also, right?
Correct, and it isn't always the case, as you see in the Henderson Inclusion School. Sometimes the kids who are catching on to a concept more quickly are the kids who do have the disabilities, and sometimes it's the opposite. So there's been a lot of research done that inclusion does benefit entire communities, not just people with disabilities, and so there's that big educational component to it. And there's trying to go against the fears that people have that it's just for other people with kids with disabilities. It's just all the research supports that it's beneficial to entire communities. So the work that we do with the Play Brigade is not limited to just playgrounds, and I want to clarify that because it's so easy of a demonstration to show people what inclusion is, but it's not the whole everything. And so the work that we do is really in a couple of different areas. We do a lot of advocacy. We do a lot of raising awareness and having conversations like this. We do an inclusion summit, usually twice a year at John Hancock. This year, actually in November, we're co-sponsoring the Ruderman Inclusion Summit. It's now a national conference that we're really proud to be a part of, and that's happening in early November at the World Trade Center, Seaport Hotel World Trade Center. We went to Annie. I brought my 2 girls to Annie. It was at the City Wang Theater. It cost a fortune because I'm bringing a nurse with me to help with medicines and things that my daughter will need just sort of throughout the performance. And so I have the 2 girls, I have me, I have the nurse. We have snacks, we have souvenirs, tickets, we have parking. Okay, so it becomes this $450 experience. And we got there, and the wheelchair accessible seats are in the absolute last section of the theater. There are more than 2 rows, but the 2 wheelchair rows are behind the seats. And there's a wheelchair right in front of us with a teenage girl who has a high headrest. So my daughter's chair is behind this giant headrest. So then I'm taking her out of her wheelchair. She's sitting on my lap, and I'm on a folding chair because those are the accommodations for companion seating for the wheelchair rows. So for $400-something, I'm sitting behind, obstructed view in the very last row, can barely see. I've got my daughter out of her chair. I have another daughter who's like trying to get into the...
How does that not make you ballistic?
I left. We left. Yeah. We left the show. We left the show, and I was angry. And so there's 2 ways you can do it. You can stomp your feet and pound your fist, and you can go to the box office and say, this is ridiculous, and da-da-da-da-da-da, because that's the feeling that's like this, it's just brewing like a volcano about to erupt. But then what I've had to force myself to do as an advocate, not an activist and not an angry person, is take all that energy and say, what can I do with this that's positive? And I think that has been a gift to me because it doesn't always come easily. And what I do instead is when I get a pre-sale code for Frozen on Ice and I want to take my family, and I go and I make the call and they don't release accessible seats, and I talk to 3 other people, hang up, call back, what do you mean you don't have accessible seats? They've only been on sale for 1 minute. Oh, we no longer have them. Like they sold them to everybody else. They just never released them. So the conversation I would have is, could you please contact the theater, the arena, and ask that they release accessible seats? This is our situation. We feel that we would like to pre-purchase the seats, and we'd like to be able to purchase them in a row that can accommodate our family. They were lovely. They were absolutely lovely. I got an email and a phone call the next day, secured the accessible seats for us, and we were able to go. And so we're looking at how do we create an opportunity to have these conversations, but really more as a self-evaluation first. And so we have a technology partner that we'll be working with to create an inclusion scorecard, starting in Boston, sort of mapping the play grade of each social, cultural, recreational facility or opportunity in Boston, and then expanding beyond that. I hear people say, I'm crazy busy. Oh my God, I'm sorry I didn't call you back. It's just so, oh my God, I've been crazy lately. And I'm just like, okay, you're talking about, your boss and when are you going to squeeze in your manicure? And I'm thinking about, when can I get this J tube out of my daughter's belly so she can eat by mouth, Right. Or my daughter's going to get a cold and get pneumonia this season and be in the ICU, and you're complaining about your kid asking you where babies come from.
So how do you keep that in perspective?
I don't know. It really differs every time. I think I just feel grateful and I feel lucky that I'm not angry. There are things that definitely make me angry, but I feel when you look at like what my life is right now, I just feel so filled with purpose that kind of overrides a lot and helps drive my daily, like waking up and knowing what I need to do. And it also makes me feel like everything else that used to affect me so much is just so petty. I just don't care,
Yeah.
I just don't have a high tolerance for like
Bullshit.
Yeah. People that make excuses and people that no one understands busy more than I do. Nobody understands challenge more than I do. Nobody understands when you have 3 bushels of apples and someone tells you, take these 2 bushels of apples and put them into the 3rd bushel, you're going to lose some apples, but you're sure as hell going to try to keep as many apples as you can in that bushel. That's my life every day. And so I have to think about what's my priority as a human being. My priority is to care for my family and teach them to be good people, to respect each other, to love each other, to try their best, and help them maximize their own personal potential, their emotional potential. And I just want to raise good kids who love their lives. For the first 18 months of Harper's life, we had nurses in our house 24/7. We still do. And every day was filled with taking her temperature, giving her medicine, doing range of motion, power wheelchair training, catheters, bowel programs, things that I had no idea what they were. Okay, so overly medicalized child who for 18 months is like a house cat, holed up, basically doing nothing, being cared for by me and a nurse, and no real play.
And you have your 2 other children.
I have 2 other children who I shuffled
2,
off,
right?
who were two and a half at this point. Well, they were 2 at the time, right into daycare. I can't, there was no way that I could manage 3 kids, one who required 99% of my attention for 24 hours a day. So they went to daycare, and then my husband and I juggled and shuffled off, and we're learning how to do all this stuff. I mean, I can basically do everything that an intensive care unit can do in my house now, except for IV medication, which I could probably do if somebody showed me. But there's a big learning curve when you have a kid with special needs. So now, here I am at 18 months, completely fried, not being good to myself, not being a good wife, not being a good mom. This is all self-critic. I'm sure everybody is probably saying I was doing fine and that everybody expects that I'm going to like fall to pieces. And I thought, oh my God, this is a life that we're prolonging. That what is her quality of life? Like what can she do? And she got a really bad pneumonia. She was in the hospital. And doctors came to us and said, you need to think about what do you want for your daughter? How far are you willing to go?
What does that mean?
You're
Like, do
taking
you wanna-
extreme measures to keep her alive right now.
Okay.
And so we had to have conversations that no parent, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And so, you know, while there's a lot of, again, going back to what the typical family's problems are, marital stress, finances, whatever, we're dealing with life or death. We're dealing with, now have a child in our home that we don't know is going to live, and it's up to us to decide. And how do we preserve the innocence of our other 2 children? How do we, what if you just have that back and forth of like, how do we make this decision, and how unfair is it that anyone should have to make that decision, and what a burden, but also what an absolute privilege to be able to make that decision, and how there are so many people with no education, no support network, no resources that are tasked with making that decision, and how scary that is, and how tragic that potentially could be. And so here we are with this massive decision. Do we let this child live? And are we doing something bad if we stop the extreme measures like the feeding tube and the oxygen and the breathing with the BiPAP to help support her breathing at night? Things that we didn't think were so extreme, but turns out those things that if they were taken away, she would die. So my husband and I had a special team from Children's Hospital that came to the house. They're called the PACT team, and they help you kind of work through a lot of these questions. And they came to the house at night, and they were there for what seemed like hours, and just sort of talked us through everything. And my thought was, well, my husband, he's like, well, she can't walk, she can't use her hands, she can't eat by herself, she can't pee on her own, she can't poop on her own, she can't. And I said, well, she can smile, she can laugh, she can make a friend, she can see the sunset, she can read poetry, she can listen to music, she can experience art. And that's when I thought, to me, that's quality of life, and it's so subjective to so many people. I thought, okay, this is heavy, and who knows where this is going. And we left that conversation with it was heavy. And we had no decisions made, and we were just, we went to bed silent and just kind of embracing and just wishing that this decision would be made on its own. And I think we were really in a place where, if I were ever praying, it would be, take this decision away from me. Mm-hmm. And the next morning I woke up and I called my husband's uncle, who's a minister, and I said, Tommy, I don't know what to do. This is the conversation we had. And Tommy, who I thought would say, do your best to this child and, her life and blah, 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 keep doing what you're doing. Tommy instead said, any decision that you make will be made out of love for your child and for your family. And the way he sees it, God has called her many times. And God has summoned her, and we've stood in his way out of love for her and given her opportunities that she wouldn't have. And so if it can relieve some pressure and some stress, allowing her to take the natural course of her life would not be making a decision to do something bad to her. It would be not interfering with God's calling. And I was like, okay, well, I can get behind that. It made me feel a little bit better, but I was like, I still don't want to make this decision. Where am I going with this?
Now, was there like a different course, like you were at a crossroads, you had to decide we're going to keep going this way, or?
This is what we thought. We thought the next day we were going to go in there because she wasn't breathing on her own. She was all hopped up on antibiotics. They were giving her oxygen. They were deep suctioning her with like a tube in her nose.
And that was the prognosis for
pneumonia. She had pneumonia.
Right, but
She was
indefinitely.
Always going to, she may not recover from it. If she does recover, she may have permanent lung damage. This will not be the last time we're in here. This will not be the last time we have this conversation. This will happen every season, maybe multiple times. We think about how far do you want to go. So the next day was a very difficult morning. My husband and I walked into the hospital room, and we were sort of feeling less pressure and less stress and ready to sort of evaluate the situation and think about it from a different perspective. And we walk in and Harper is like, hey, what's up? Let's party. And we're like, oh my God, thank God, thank God. I mean, she literally was like sprinting off the oxygen, didn't have the mask on. She seemed to be like pink and perky. We're like, okay, you just told us. Like, you just told us.
The decision.
So that was a long way to get to how did this affect my life?
So tell me a little bit about the partnership with IndyCar that's coming up 2016.
We're so excited. So we were, can I back up? Because I feel like I know we have like such limited time, but we really shot out of a cannon in our first year. We're in our second year right now. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was talking to somebody at the Boston Marathon a couple years back and telling him about what I was doing, and at the time I was just working on the playground, and he said, oh, well, you should ask us for money, and he worked for John Hancock, and I was like, well, we're not quite there yet, we're putting all the pieces in place, but sure, let's exchange information. By the time I get home, the fact that I had spoken to him had already gotten back to at least 2 other people that I knew, and then I had an email, oh, I heard you met Andy, and I was like, yeah, he was a cool guy, and I make a phone call, and we're talking about, kind of our conversation, and he's like, yeah, the person I was talking to on the phone said, yeah, he's the man. And I was like, yeah, he was really cool. He seemed really interested in my idea and very receptive to it. And the person I was speaking to said, no, he's the man. And I look, and he was the president and CEO of John Hancock Funds or John Hancock Investments. And I went, that's great, fantastic. Well, sure enough, about, a few months later, I got a call from a Boston Globe reporter who wanted to do a story about what we were working on at the time, which was strictly the playgrounds at the time. And so as soon as Boston Globe left my house, I got in touch with Andy and I said, Globe just left my house. Remember when you said I should ask you for money? Well, I hope you're still smiling now like you were then. And he was like, of course I'm still smiling. Let's talk. And he followed up with a phone call. He connected me with John Hancock's head of community and government relations. I'm sure I got his title wrong. And I went in and had a meeting with him. And right out of the gate, he said, look, this is an organization that you guys are doing something nobody else is doing. We really want to support you. Just let us know what you need. And we'd be happy to figure out how to get you there, how to help get you there. So
incredible.
John Hancock, that was just like, thank you. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
it was just a really big, and it really also reinforced that we had a great idea. Mm-hmm. We were filling a need in the community, and that if a big organization like that was going to be behind us, all it did was really open doors as well. And their support has been just amazing. They have built our entire website. You saw our website.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you, John Hancock. We had a whole web team working on it for months. That opened plenty of doors. Hancock connected us with Chris Cook, who's the Commissioner of Parks and Rec for the City of Boston. Chris Cook connected us with the folks from IndyCar. We had some meetings with the IndyCar president and CEO. A race management company approached us and said, hey, listen, we want to do a road race in Boston, and we've been looking for the right charity partner. We've heard a lot about you. We think that you're the right fit. Would you like to do a road race? And we said, what's the catch? And they said, nothing. You'll be the beneficiary of the road race. We said, that's great. Let's do it. Go into Parks and Rec and say, where can we put a road race? There's no road race space. There's no weekend between May and October where things aren't already shut down. So then the team sort of got the idea that we should connect with Indy because that was sort of in the works, and it would be a nice way to not have to shut down streets and get all the permitting because it was already going to be done. And if they could find a space for us in their lineup, could be a really great situation for us.
Yeah,
put us on a national
promotion. Yeah,
absolutely, all those reasons, a national platform, and really give us an opportunity to talk about inclusion and have a big audience, and to involve the community, but also have a race that all of the race entry fees and all of the donations, when you have a charity road race, all of those go directly back into this community.
Right.
And a lot of those road races that happen don't benefit this community directly. Many of them go out.
National.
They go out. Yeah. And so we think that IndyCar's presence in Boston, for us, is a real positive. It's difficult to hear people talking down, equating it to the Olympics and all of that. I can't even listen to that because I'm looking at an organization that basically the first time we met them, they said, what do you need? We want to do it. We think what you're doing is great. Let's do it. And Debbie and I walked out of our first meeting with them, and Debbie, my work wife, said, why were they so nice to us? Why were they nice to us? Like, we're doing something great. We're like doing something good for the community that people feel good thinking and knowing that they're helping.
It is incredible, though. Most people do not have the reception that you guys have received. I mean, I think that's to your point, that like this is a need. I think a lot of nonprofits like really sort of struggle to build up the consensus and have to do a lot of community education.
Yeah.
I think like my initial response to looking at your website, and I really encourage people to do that. We're going to put it on Highbrow Lowbrow because it's definitely a wealth of information. But it also really resonates just with anybody who has children or is caring for somebody to think about how something being inclusive is actually the opposite of being exclusive.
That's right.
And that things are designed to be exclusive.
That's right.
And it's the opposite of what our sort of natural instinct is when you come from a caring position.
Right.
So,
well, one of our requirements when both race management came to us and when we started our conversations with IndyCar was, sure, we'll do this, as though we were ever going to say no, but we'll do this on one condition. It needs to be open to people of all abilities.
The race.
Yeah. And so it's a running race, but running is defined differently depending on what your ability is. And so there'll be people who run with a stroller or pushed in a stroller. There are people who do push room wheelchair. There are people who walk.
Are you going to run it?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But I think it's, a really easy way to participate in the community, do something good for the community, and do it at the level that you're comfortable with doing it. And it's a fairly short
and do it within
course.
the spirit of the whole project, right?
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, nobody loses in this equation. I am grateful for the opportunity that IndyCar Boston has provided us, and I am all for the race coming to Boston. I just think, it would be a really missed opportunity if things stood in the way of that happening. It's almost like saying no to your community. If this would be we'd be able to have big impact through our partnership with Indy. So
very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have to wrap it up. But thank you so much.
It's like really, my kids are standing outside on the curb.
Speaking of caring for people,
yes.
Gotta get in the car. But no, it was awesome, and I would love to check back in with you again
sure.
at some point. That would be
Love
really
it.
fun.
Love it.
Keep us posted on everything.